Well, thank you very much, and I'm very pleased to be here to share some insights on African institutional infrastructure investing. My name's Hubert Danso, and I'm the CEO and Chairman of Africa Investor. We're an institutional infrastructure investment platform based in South Africa, working across the entire African continent. And I also chair the African Union Development Agency's Continental Business Network, which is a heads of state private asset owners platform, which facilitates institutional investment capital and policy perspectives to African Union heads of state. I'm really here to just share some perspectives about one of the leading initiatives that we're driving at the Continental Business Network with the African Union Development Agency, called the 5% Agenda. And the 5% agenda is essentially premised on the fact that, the African institutional investment allocations to infrastructure, unfortunately, it's really less than 2% of assets held by our pension and sovereign wealth funds are allocated to African infrastructure as an investable asset class. And our commitment and our pledge was essentially to create a compact between African asset owners and African heads of state and public policymakers responsible for infrastructure to create a compact where we would feel comfortable to increase our allocations to infrastructure to at least 5%. And that's commonly been known as the 5% agenda. 40 African Union heads of state have now bought into this agenda. And the difference between why we are comfortable and why we're progressing with this agenda is because historically, the African infrastructure investment landscape has been predominantly driven by development partners and development finance institutions. And it hasn't necessarily addressed to our complete knowledge and satisfaction the types of issues and risk-adjusted returns and the types of structures that we as asset owners are familiar with, particularly when investing in a long-term asset like infrastructure. The 5% agenda was formed prior to COVID, but I think what COVID has actually done, because of the underinvestment in some critical infrastructure, that's both been, become a bit clearer because of the regional supply chains, as well as the health care related infrastructure. It's really caused everyone to want to redouble efforts to support it. And I think the other major driver of the added emphasis is this exciting opportunity, which called the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is essentially going to be creating Africa's largest, well, the world's largest free trade area by number of countries. So it's going to be a 3.2 trillion GDP free trade area. And for that to happen, there's going to be a lot of industrial and logistics related infrastructure investment opportunities. So we are really getting behind that, because there's such a huge and thriving domestic market. And it also gives a great catalyst for Africa to be able to export into other regions much more competitively. So that's a whole new set of infrastructure. And of course, that with COVID and the new partnership that we have through the 5% agenda with the policymakers and the double-digit returns and the ability to structure those transactions together with the public sector, which has never happened before in this way, we think is a unique opportunity set that we're very excited about. One of the key other programs that fall within the institutional investor public partnership is our own infrastructure co-investment platform, which is where we work with our own community of sovereign funds and institutional investors, public pension funds and the like, where we as a club allocate capital, pool capital, and we also originate transactions through this infrastructure co-investment platform. And then we provide the anchor investment, do all the diligence, and then we reach out to our global peers from, pension funds and sovereign wealth funds from around the world, who are looking not only to get access to the asset class, but also to work alongside institutions like our own that have skin in the game, that have the political proximity and the local knowledge to be able to assess, the validity and be able to manage the risks as well as the rewards associated with these particular transactions. And lastly, I suppose I have to always give our African heads of state a lot of credit. There's a group within the African Union which is dubbed PC as the acronym, which is PICI, which is the Presidential Infrastructure Champions Initiative. That's currently chaired by the President of South Africa, who is the current head of the African Union. And it involves a number of other leading heads of state, Kenya, Nigeria, Rwanda, Senegal, Ghana, Algeria, Egypt, and the list goes on. And these heads of state have realized that it's very important to have, in such a politically driven asset class by nature as infrastructure, to actually have that sort of participation and support, not only by the heads of state to say, look, the government really supports these projects, but as infrastructure is a complex asset with a lot of public regulatory issues surrounding it. So some of the projects that, have historically met with some bottlenecks, the heads of state within the Presidential Infrastructure Champions Initiative get involved directly to, really understand the challenges at the policy level and then bring the full force of their office and the respective, mandates of the different portfolio heads, typically the ministers and then the sub-director generals, to clear the path for bottlenecks associated with facilitating and attracting more institutional capital to African infrastructure to meet the goals of the 5% agenda. And in terms of origination and opportunities, we work, and again, very closely with the ministers of finance and the heads of state on the key priority programs that they have. Under the African Union, we have what is known as the Program for Infrastructure Development for Africa, PIDA. And there are a number of iterations of projects that come within that particular program, but right across your transport sector. And these are cross-border projects, right across your telecommunications, your energy, your renewable energy, your ICT hubs, all of the big strategic sub-asset classes that, are really going to drive Africa's transformation. Each year, as I mentioned earlier, we are really looking at an infrastructure deficit of anywhere between $50 to $100 billion. And we see that as a lot of opportunity, particularly when you look at OECD markets for infrastructure, and they're very saturated and competitive. And it's very challenging to get what we offer on the continent, which is double-digit returns. We encourage and invite you, if you want to participate in some of those double-digit returns that we are pursuing and enjoying through participating in African infrastructure, contact us, and through the 5% agenda, and in particular the infrastructure co-investment platform, we'd love to be able to engage you. Thank you very much.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.